सहसां वृषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोऽभ्योऽद्यमृतात् सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया स्पृणोतु अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासं शरीरं मे विचर्षणं जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कर्णाभ्यां भूरिविश्रुवं ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया पिहितः श्रुतं मे गोपाय मेधादेवी जुषमानान आगात् विश्वाची भद्रासु मनस्यमाना त्वया जुष्टानुदमान तुरुक्तान् बृहद्भगेम विदते सुवीराः त्वया जुष्ट ऋषिर्भवति देवि त्वया ब्रह्मा गतश्रीरुतद्वया त्वया जुष्टश्चित्रं विन्दते वसुसानो जुषस्वद्रविनो नमेते मेधां म इन्द्रो ददातु मेधां देवी सरस्वती मेधां मे अश्विना बुभावा दत्तां पुष्करः सदा अप्सरासु छया मेधा गन्धर्वेषु शयन्मनः दैवी मेधा सरस्वती सामां मेधा सुरभिर्जुषतागु स्वाहा आमां मेधा सुरभिर्विश्वरूपा हिरण्यवर्णा जगती जगम्या ऊर्जस्वती पयसा बिम्बमाना सामां मेधा सुप्रतीका दुषन्तां मयि मेधां मयि प्रजां मय्यग्निश्चेजो ददातु मयि मेधां मयि प्रजां मयीन्द्र इन्द्रियं ददातु मयि मेधां मयि प्रजां मयि सूर्यो प्राजो ददातु हंस हंसाय विद्महे परमहंसाय धीमहि तन्नो हंसः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Om Shri Sai Ram. On this sacred occasion of Aradhana Mahotsavam, let us explore more deeply what this concept of Aradhana, of prayer, really means, and how through connecting more consciously, praying more intensely, we can more deeply experience and manifest Swami in our hearts and our lives. We're going to share with you 4 stages of prayer that you might find, you might recognize both in your own inner experience of prayer and that we can also see manifest physically in Swami's life. So stage 1 is when the devotee speaks and God listens. The devotee speaks and God listens. We might experience this internally. When we pray, we cry out, we call to Swami, and we feel his response, we feel his presence, perhaps in a rainbow, perhaps in a number plate that says 108, perhaps in a quote we read. There are so many ways in which we feel Swami is listening to us, Swami is hearing us. We find this also in Baba's life. Let's go back to the sacred year of 1940, where Swami declared his avatarhood and said, I am Sathya. My devotees are calling me, my mission has begun. For hundreds of years, devotees, maybe thousands even, devotees had been praying and asking God to take human form to come down and uplift us. The devotees had spoken and God had listened. Stage 2 is now when God speaks and the devotee listens. Again, we experience this internally. When we feel our conscience guiding us on what to do in a particular situation, God is speaking and we've got the chance to listen. This might be through the study of Swami's words. There are many ways in which we hear God speak and we have the chance to listen. Again, it's something we find externally in Swami's life. You look at the 1950s onwards, where Prashanti Nilayam had been erected and hundreds, thousands of devotees were gathering to hear him speak directly, to listen to the discourses. We also felt his words, experienced his words through his writing, the Sanatana Sarathis, the Vahinis. We've been so fortunate as devotees to directly be able to listen to God speak and have the chance to hear that and hopefully practice that as best as we can. Stage 3 of prayer is now when both God and devotee speak and listen. Again, it's something we experience internally in a beautiful dialogue encounter with Swami, perhaps at our altars, perhaps just as we go about our days and are speaking to Swami within, feeling him responding and having an inner connection conversation. It's something we find again externally in Swami's life. In the last few decades, countless devotees had the opportunity to have an interview with Baba. Some performed cultural programs and could exchange a few words afterwards. And the youth were perhaps the most blessed. Swami spent so much of his time conversing, guiding, shaping the lives of the young ones. Both God and devotee could speak and listen. Now, the fourth and final stage of prayer, the one perhaps for us to really aspire to in this time, is when neither speak, but both listen. Externally, we have no choice. We cannot speak to Swami physically, perhaps in the way we once could, and we have to listen to him in our hearts. There's no doubt that the Divine Mother knows our fears, listens to us, knows our doubts, our concerns, perhaps before we've even realized them. But the question is now, as devotees, can we listen? And how do we do that? Swami's made it very clear. In the sound of silence is the voice of God. If we can take just a few moments to take some breaths, slow down, sincerely practice sadhana to quieten our minds, to still our minds, there is no doubt that we will be able to hear him every moment of every day, guiding us, shaping us, and ultimately manifesting through us in his divine love. Om Shri Sai Ram.
जय परतीशा जय परमेशा जय परतीशा जय परमेशा जय गौरी
Jai
ప్రాచీన కాలము నుండి భారతీయ సంస్కృతిని పురస్కరించుకొని అనేక మంది అనేక విధములైన మార్గములతో భగవంతుని చేరుటకు అనేక ప్రయత్నములు సలుపుతూ వచ్చారు.
Basing on the propagation and the teaching of the culture of Bharat, since ancient times, people have been pursuing various paths in spirituality.
ఇందులో వైదిక మార్గమునందు 4 విధములైనటువంటి యొక్క మార్గములు ఏర్పరచుకున్నారు.
As per the Vedic doctrine, there are 4 paths.
మొదటిది సత్యవతి ఆరాధన.
The first one is form of worship called Satyavati.
రెండవది అంగవతి.
The second form, Angavati.
మూడవది అన్యవతి.
Third one, Anyavati.
నాలుగవది నిదానవతి.
The next one is Nidanavati.
ఇందులో మొట్టమొదటిది సత్యవతి ఆరాధన.
The first form of worship is Satyavati.
ఈ సత్యవతి ఆరాధనగా భగవంతుడు సర్వత్రా ఉన్నటువంటి వాడనియు, పాలలో వెన్న ఏ విధంగా సర్వత్రా కణం కణంనందు కూడా ఉన్నదో అదే విధంగానే భగవంతుడు సర్వత్రా ఉన్నాడని విశ్వసించి ఆరాధించటం.
The first form of worship called Satyavati wants us to believe that God is everywhere, like butter spread all over the milk, and it is present in every cell, in every drop.
నువ్వులలో నూనె ఉండినట్టుగా, కర్రలో నిప్పుండినట్టుగా భగవంతుడు ఈ సర్వత్రా దృశ్యకల్పితమైనటువంటి ఈ జగత్తంతా ఇక్కడను నిండినది భగవంతుడే అనేటువంటి సత్యాన్ని గుర్తించి వారు ఆరాధన సలిపేటువంటి వారు.
The Satyavati form of worship will also tell you that just as you find oil in silk seeds, just as you find the fire in the wood, in the entire apparent world, you find the divinity.
విశ్వం విష్ణుమయం జగత్.
The entire universe is filled with Vishnu alone.
కనుకనే జగత్తంతైకుడును విష్ణుమయమైనటువంటిదనియు, జగత్తు కార్యస్వరూపమనియు, విష్ణువు కారణస్వరూపుడని విశ్వసించి ఆరాధన సలుపుతూ వచ్చారు.
This mode of worship considers divine as the cause and the universe its effect.
రెండవది అంగవతి.
The second form of worship is Angavati.
దీనిని మరింత సూక్ష్మమైనటువంటి మార్గంలో దీన్ని ప్రవేశింపజేశారు.
It explains in a subtler way.
ఇందులో పంచభూతములు శబ్ద స్పర్శ రూప రస గంధము, ఆకాశము, వాయువు, జలము, భూమి, శబ్దము అన్నిటితో చేరి ఈ పంచభూత స్వరూపమే పరమాత్ముడని విశ్వసించి ఒక్కొక్క భూతమును కూడా ప్రత్యేకించి ఆరాధన సలుపుతూ వచ్చారు.
Here all the 5 elements are considered divine, and each of the element is worshipped. You find the 5 elements, the space and the earth, the wind, all the 5 elements, everyone is worshipped individually.
ఈనాటికి కూడాను గంగా మహాతాయి, మహాతల్లి, గంగా మాత అని కూడాను నేటికి కూడాను గంగను పూజిస్తూ వస్తున్నారు.
Even today, Ganges, Ganga is worshipped as the divine mother.
అగ్నిహోత్రుడు అని యజ్ఞయాగాది సమయంలందు అగ్నిని కూడాను ఆరాధిస్తూ వస్తున్నారు.
Fire is worshipped as God, where all offerings are made.
వరుణదేవుడు అని ఈ యొక్క గాలి వానను కూడాను ఆరాధిస్తూ వచ్చారు.
Rain is considered as rain god and worshipped.
కనుకని ఈ విధంగా పంచభూతములు కూడాను ప్రాచీన సంస్కృతిని పురస్కరించుకొని భారతీయులు ఆరాధన సలుపుతూ వచ్చారు.
Bharatiyas worshipped all the 5 elements as per the tradition of the ancient culture.
వీరినే రెండవ తెగైనటువంటి అంగవతి ఆరాధన.
This is the second form of worship called Angavati.
అన్యవతి.
Third one, Anyavati.
ఇది కేవలము ఒక్కొక్క ఆకారములకు ఒక్కొక్క చిహ్నము మాత్రమే తీసుకొని ఆరాధన సల్పుతూ ఫలానా దేవతా స్వరూపమని ఆ చిహ్నమును పురస్కరించుకొని నిరూపించుతూ వచ్చారు.
In this Anyavati form of worship, there is a specific form and a specific sign, and we worship basing on that form of our own imagination.
కోదండపాణి అంటే రాములు అని ఒక అర్థం.
Kodandapani means Rama.
జటాజూటములు ధరించి గంగను శిరస్సుపై ఉంచుకున్నటువంటి వాడుంటే ఇతను ఈశ్వరుడు అని ఒక అర్థం.
The one with the 4 locks and Ganga, the Ganges above, is Lord
శంఖ
Shiva.
చక్ర గదా పద్మమును ధరించినటువంటి వాడు విష్ణువు అని.
The one with conch, the mace, and wheel is Vishnu.
శిఖపించమును ధరించినటువంటి వాడు, మురళిని చేపట్టినటువంటి వాడు కృష్ణుడు అని.
The one with peacock feather and flute is Lord Krishna.
వీణా వాణి అనేటువంటిది సరస్వతి అని.
Saraswati has Veena.
ఈ విధంగా ఒక్కొక్కరి వారి యొక్క చిహ్నమును పురస్కరించుకొని ఆరాధనలు సల్పుతూ వచ్చేటువంటి వారు.
All the four different deities are worshipped based on the insignia they have.
ఈ విధంగా కొన్ని చిహ్నములు మాత్రమే ధరించి తద్వారా దైవాన్ని ఆరాధిస్తూ వచ్చారు.
They worship all these signs which go to the divine as per their own idea.
ఒకటి రూపమని, రెండవది నామమని.
One is the form, the other is the name.
ఈ రూపనామం ఆధారం చేసుకుని ఆరాధిస్తూ వచ్చారు.
They worship basing on these
ఈ
two,
రూపనామం
name and
రెండు కూడా
form.
ఒకదానితో ఒకటి చేరినప్పుడే దివ్యత్వం అనేది ఆవిర్భవిస్తుంది.
Unless there is perfect combination of the name and form, you don't find the divinity originating there.
ఇక నిదానవతి అనేటువంటిది మరొకటి.
The next one is Nidhanavati.
ఈ నిదానవతి అనేటువంటి దాన్ని ఒక విధమైనటువంటి యొక్క సాధనల కింద మార్చుకుంటూ వచ్చారు.
Nidhanavati is a spiritual practice, sadhana, undertaken.
నవవిధ మార్గములోని కూడా బోధించారు.
Also 9 paths of devotion.
ఈ విధమైన మార్గముల చేతనే భగవంతుని చింతిస్తూ స్మరిస్తూ వారు గమ్యాన్ని చేరుకుంటూ వచ్చారు.
Following these 9 paths of devotion, they think of God.
Sai Ram, offering my most humble pranams at the lotus feet of beloved Bhagawan, dear Swami, respected elders, dear brothers and sisters. Speaking of the first level or stage of Aradhana or prayer to God, I am reminded of a doha or a couplet by an Indian saint and philosopher, Sant Kabir Das. He says, "Dukh mein sumiran sab kare, sukh mein kare na koi." Meaning, in times of difficulty, suffering and distress, everybody thinks of you, O Lord, but in times of happiness, nobody thinks of you. Therefore, it is not surprising that most of us turn to God or have come to Swami when we are faced with difficulties or sufferings. Whether those difficulties are of the Artha type, meaning of health and medical suffering, or the Artharthi type, meaning where we want power, status, career growth, more wealth, whatever that is. Or whether it is of the Jignasu type, where we are faced with existential questions of life. Whatever be the kind of difficulty, ultimately we turn to God. Here is the beautiful experience of Mrs. Saroja Girishankar of how she called out to God and how Swami responded in the most amazing manner. This was recorded in 1996 and I think it would be wonderful to hear to it in her own words.
One of the biggest impressions Swami made on me was when I first went and saw him in 72 and came away to this country with 2 little kids, a child who was 1 and another child who was 4. And when we landed here back in 72 for about, in 73, I was struck by a strange illness. The doctors could not figure out what in the world was wrong with me. Neither the Mayo Clinic nor anybody in Boston could figure out. I just was extremely weak and I couldn't even breathe and I was laid out in bed. All the doctors had given up and what do? I'm a 27-year-old, 2 kids, nobody in this country. Now what do I do? So I started reciting Swami's name because I'd heard him speak about it before I came to America. But the Swami's name, I would repeat it constantly, but my memory was not very good at that time because I had become so weak. I could not walk, I could not think, I could not talk, or I couldn't even sit up and eat. The only thing I could force myself to say was to say Om Shri Sai Ram. Now I did this for almost 6 months to 8 months and nothing happened. So we reserved our seats to go to India. This was back in December 1975. So we were supposed to leave in 2 days and then I became so severely sick that he could not even have taken me in a stretcher. So we canceled it. Again, in April, we decided to go, and again I became so sick he had to cancel. And then in the month of May, I said, listen, it doesn't matter even if I die in the plane, just take me there. So We reserve the seats. We are supposed to leave on May 22nd or 23rd, I don't remember. 3 days before that, my husband gets a very strange urinary infection and is bleeding. And I didn't even have a single friend to take us to the hospital. I take the key, go to the car, because somebody has to go and see my husband. I say, Sai Ram, I don't know because I can't walk because my balance is not good. They think it is a brain tumor, but they can't identify it exactly where the tumor is. But I have all the signs of a brain tumor. I take somebody's help and ask them to take me upstairs to my husband's side. And he's very groggy. And we both hold hands and we pray for a while. Then I somehow get back home because the children are at home. They don't know what's going on. And he says, Saro, don't cancel the flight. Let's go day after tomorrow. And he's still bleeding and he still has an infection. So what we do is we go ahead and finally he's able to drive us to the New York airport. It's about 100 miles. We get onto the Air India plane. We get in. And just before the flight takes off, my husband starts the problem again. So the pilot has to announce to see that there's a doctor on the flight. He's in excruciating pain. So he takes some medication. Somebody gives him something. If you could imagine this husband and wife, late 20s, my husband is in the early 30s, with 2 little kids, both of us so severely sick. We end up in Bombay, and Bombay can be very difficult in end of May and early June. And my parents are in Bangalore, and we tell them we are coming, we want to go to see Swami straight. A week before I left, Swami comes in my dream and he says, I'll see you at 10 o'clock. All right? I mean, I don't even think I'm going to live to see him. The taxis in 1976 were not like the taxis of today. We had a lot of difficulty, and the roads were very difficult. We go to Puttaparthi, there's not a soul in Puttaparthi. Our hearts and our souls, you have this terrible sinking feeling. You've come after 3 years, you've made the final journey just to see him, and he's not here. So it's around 9:45 or so. So my mother says, listen, let them go to the accommodation office, whether Swami is here or not. Let's go and sit in the shade in front of Swami's house. So my mother takes me and puts me there. And usually when I become very sick, I would just meditate a little bit I was short of breath a lot. So I'm sitting there and next to my mother, and my husband and my father had gone to get the accommodation. We had closed my eyes, and I'm meditating a little bit just so I can breathe. So my mother shakes me up in a second. He says, open your eyes and see. In those days, all these fancy buildings were not there. And I opened my eyes. Swami is standing in the veranda looking at me and my mother. And he raised his hand. There's no other person there. So I'm thinking something is wrong. Maybe I'm still dreaming. Anyway, I'm sick. I'm probably dreaming. She says, no. And on the other side, in the meantime, my husband and my father had come and they were standing next to us with the 2 children. So he looked up, Swami said, blessed. And then we had gotten the accommodation. And then my mother said, what is the time? What's the time? 10 o'clock. So my mother takes me in the afternoon and puts me at the back so that I can lean on the compound there as the wall, the parapet. So Swami comes to the veranda, and I'm thinking, probably it was a freak thing, he coming and seeing us at 10 o'clock. He gets out from the veranda, he makes a beeline, I'm at the back, he comes there, and he makes a vibhuti and puts in my hand. And I'm hollering and crying. Finally I have reached. I can die, and I'm hollering. And he says in Hindi, Aise nahi rona, don't cry like this. I think I scared him stiff with my crying. So he went back and he goes to the men's side, and my husband is there, and he stands up and tells him. He says, I brought my wife, she's sick. Swami says, I know, come in. So he takes my parents first inside. They talk to him. They don't tell him. He doesn't ask them about my illness, and they don't tell him anything about my illness. They all come out. Then I and my husband go with my children. And you know how Swami stands next to you? He's like this. He looks at me. I'm probably an inch shorter than he is. So he looks at me and he says, in Tamil, in my language, he says, I don't know how many Tamilians are here. And he said, Amma, enna thavippe enna paakarathukku. That means how much of pining you had done. He said, twice you almost got onto the plane, you couldn't make it. He says, I feel it. I feel it right here.
The second level of Aradhana or prayerful worship is when God speaks and devotee listens. There are those experiences where Swami has entered the lives of many people unasked, unprayed for, even when those people had no clue about who this Sathya Sai is. Well, it is probably the merit of several past lifetimes that God decides to enter a person's life unasked. I am reminded of the experiences narrated by Dr. Art Ong Jumsai. He is a long-standing devotee of Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai Baba. But the interesting thing is, Swami entered his life at a point in time when he had no clue who Swami was. And for several years, he did not even know that Swami had entered his life. Well, it would be best to listen to that experience in his own words. And of course, there is also a second incident which he narrates, which is a little more recent, because the first incident happened way back in the 1940s during the Second World War. Dr. Art Ong Jumsai.
This happened during the World War II. I was born right at the beginning of the World War II, and at that time in Thailand we were invaded by Japan first and later on by the Allies as we were occupied. So a lot of bombing took place, and my house was in the middle of a military barrack. And my mother told me this story because I couldn't remember, I was only a baby. My mother said, one day, when there was a lot of bombing, a young man came to our house. And that young man, who looked like a monk, gave a little packet to my mother. And he instructed my mother to spread this over the roof, and then you'll be safe, we'll be safe from the bombing. So my mother opened up the packet, and she described to me as fine sand. And she did that, she spread that over the roof, and our house was the only house in that area that was not damaged by bombing. When I met Swami, of course, I suspected that it must have been Swami. So when I told that story, Swami talked to the faculty members. I did not give his mother fine sand. I gave Viputi. Well, the faculty members kindly came to me with that, what Swami was saying. So I knew that Swami has been looking after all of us for a long, long time. We are so lucky to be in his presence. And it is not by chance. Bhagawan Baba has been preparing us for centuries. He's been waiting for us patiently for us to come. He has planned all this. He has been looking after all of us for a long, long time. Now, I just want to tell you another story, and that is about Bhagawan's promise, the Avatar's promise. In the year 1983, I came to Puttapati to attend the first international conference for overseas Balvikas gurus. So I came to that conference, and Swami spoke to us every day. He's so full of love for all the gurus. And then he made a promise. He said that if you take up this job of a guru, teaching children, we don't have to worry about anything else. He will look after us. He will take care of us. So that came from the Avatar. He made that promise to all of us. We went back to our respective countries, all full of enthusiasm. We all started to work. I started to work on education for young children since then, 19 years now. And this is the story I'd like to relate to you. I had a factory, and that factory was in the suburb of Bangkok. There was a lot of thieves, a lot of people who would break in at night. So I hired a guard to look after the factory. And the guard was very lazy. He used to go to sleep at night time. And one day, he was woken up by someone. He didn't know who that person was. And that man came, woke him up, and told him, "Perform your duty well." Well, he was shocked and very scared. He didn't know who this person was. And when that person went out, he tried to follow, but already he has disappeared. The next night, the guard went to sleep again. And again, he was woken up by this strange man. The guard didn't know who this person was, but he was getting more and more scared. What is happening? Why is this person come to wake him up? And then this went on for 4 consecutive nights. And the poor man, the poor guard, he was so scared that he came running to me in the morning when I came to work. And he told me the whole story. I said, wait, come into my room. And there in my room was a picture of Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai Baba. When he saw it, his hair stood on end, and he said, "That's the man! That's the man!"
Hembus aroma wibuti menyelimuti darsanmu Baba, senyummu Baba, kami bersimpuh di kaki Padmamu, melihat kemuliaanmu. Angin berhembus aroma wibuti menyelimuti darsanmu Baba, senyummu Baba, kami bersimpuh di kaki Padmamu, melihat kemuliaanmu. Atas rahmatmu dan pengorbanan kasih sayangmu, Baba menuntun bebas dari lahir dan derita. Kami berharap tak terpisahkan denganmu, tak terpisahkan denganmu. kemuliaanmu. Atas rahmatmu dan pengorbanan kasih sayangmu, Bapa menuntun bebas dari lahir dan derita. Kami berharap tak terpisahkan denganmu, tak terpisahkan denganmu. Atas rahmatmu dan pengorbanan kasih sayangmu, Bapa menuntun bebas dari lahir dan derita. Kami berharap tak terpisahkan denganmu, tak terpisahkan denganmu.
On one occasion, Swami came to a primary school student and asked a little boy, "Boy, how many brothers do you have?" This boy replied, "Swami, I have one brother." Swami said, "No, all are brothers." The next day, Swami again comes to this boy and asks him, "Boy, how many sisters do you have?" This boy said, "Swami, I don't have any sisters." Swami said, "Hey, all are sisters." The third day, Swami comes to this boy, and this boy is now ready with the line of questioning and answer that he must give. So when Swami asks him, "Boy, how many friends do you have?" He says, "Swami, all are friends." And Swami says, "No, God is your only friend." Indeed, Swami or God is our only friend, and therefore it is natural that when we develop this friendship, we move to the third level or stage of Aradhana or prayer, where both God and devotee speak and both God and devotee listen. At this point in time, we wonder, how can this happen when Swami is not physically on the face of earth, when the avatarhood is complete? But then, this conversation is happening at every moment, at every place on earth, as beautifully revealed by Dr. John Hislop in a beautiful incident. Interestingly, Dr. John Hislop wrote a book titled Conversations with Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai Baba.
So where is Swami? Well, Swami is here right beside us. We can ask him in our hearts, in our conscience. And I'll tell you the story of the McDowells to illustrate how he is always, always here. The McDowells, there's the father and the son and the mother. I think the mother has now passed away. They lived on a small farm in Kentucky, several miles away from the nearest town. And their custom every day was to, in the afternoon, go in the house and shut the door, and they would meditate for a couple hours. And they also had on this farm a dog, which had been with them for a long time, and of which they were very, very fond. Well, one day, as dogs do, this dog simply disappeared. Must have been killed somehow or other. He was gone. Then the next day, or a couple days later, a dog came on the grounds of the farm. And he came up to them and started to bark and jump up at them and lick their hand. So they thought, the mother and the father and the son, well, here's another dog, let us adopt him. So they adopted that dog. Now came the time for their afternoon meditation. And they couldn't have the dog running around barking while they were meditating. So the father, Mr. McDowell, took this new dog and put him in the garage. Now the garage had two doors. The door of the car goes in, and the door the passengers walk out of, like most garages do. So Mr. McDowell put the dog in the garage and locked both doors so the dog couldn't get out. So then they did their meditation and they came out, and there was the dog at the foot of the stairs, the veranda stairs, barking. And Mrs. McDowell and the son went on down, but Mr. McDowell, who really wasn't yet a devotee, you know, the ladies come first, and if they're lucky, the men folk sometimes follow. That was the case with the McDowells. So Mr. McDowell started down the steps, and he had a balustrade, a railing on the porch. And so he stopped halfway down and put his head in his hands like that and was looking at the dog, wondering. And then sort of a sotto voice to himself, but the others could hear him. He said, "It's got to be Swami." So they didn't pay any attention to him. After all, that's just Father. Why should they pay attention to Father? So then, that was a small incident, completely forgotten. 3 years later, they came on their first visit to see Swami. And my wife and I happened to be there at that same time. And when the McDowells were called in for interview, my wife and I were called in the same group of people. Now, those of you who have been in an interview with Swami, you know his custom. That is, he will speak to almost everybody. He'll ask an innocent question like, where do you come from? As though he didn't know. And are you married? And what's your wife's name? Although she's sitting right there. And anything to just sort of put the people at ease and suppress the tension that everybody has when they go in to see Swami. And so he went around the room talking to everybody, one by one, and then he came to the McDowells who were sitting. First he had stopped. The people just before the McDowells were three Indian ladies. And in speaking to them, he had bent down and said something to them quietly that other people couldn't hear. Then he came to the McDowells. Well, Mrs. McDowell, as a lady, doesn't miss things like that. And so it occurred to her, I bet he said something about us. And so when the meeting was over, Mrs. McDowell went up to these three Indian ladies, followed them out, and said, would you mind telling me what Swami said to you? And they said, no, we don't mind. He said, they think I'm a dog. Mind you, 3 years later, 3 years after the event, and such a minor, unimportant event, yet Swami knew exactly and even didn't forget, remembered. So therefore, when we ask who will help us, we can say that Swami will help us. And where is Swami? Swami is here with us at all times.
What a beautiful experience that shows beyond doubt that Swami is always above us, below us, within us, all around us. Swami would say that the radio waves exist everywhere at all the times. It is up to us to tune in our radios to the correct frequency in order to experience those radio waves. So too, Swami's presence and Swami's love is all around us at all times. We need to tune the radio of our heart to the correct frequency of divine love, and there we will experience Him. The next, we have an experience narrated by Mr. Manfred Müller from Germany. It shows the fourth level of Aradhana or prayer, where neither God nor devotee speaks, yet both listen.
For my first experience with Swami, we have to go back into the year 1989, which was my first visit to Prashanti Nilayam. It was in the very early morning, and we were sitting on our suitcases in front of the accommodation office, waiting there to get a room for our stay. But our tour guide told us that we have to wait till the morning darshan is over. To be honest, at that time I didn't know what darshan meant. There was a constant stream of people floating by, and suddenly my wife stood up and joined a group of women and disappeared in the crowd. I was wondering what she was doing, but I was too tired after this long flight and an adventurous taxi drive to the ashram, so I didn't pay further attention. 2 hours later, she came back. She clasped my arm and she was sobbing, and she said, "I think I finally found what I've always thought. I think I have come home." I was a little bit puzzled, and to be honest, I thought that she probably lost her mind. But she continued, "You should have been with me in this darshan, when this man with his orange robe and the crown of black hair appeared. Suddenly the air was full of energy, and I had the feeling that he was radiating a constant flow of love." Okay, I didn't know what she was talking about. But 3 days later, our group was called for an interview. So all of us joined together in front of the interview room, and I was trying to think of all these questions I wanted to ask Swami. Most important, whether he really is God. But suddenly all these questions seemed to be irrelevant. I simply couldn't even remember. Instead of that, a constant flow of tears filled my eyes, and I had the feeling that I was crying away all the grief of the past 32 years of my life. And then it happened to me, when we were gathered in the interview room and Swami looked straight into my eyes. Suddenly I knew what my wife had tried to explain to me. And I felt this immense unconditional love that touched my heart, and I had the feeling that it would stay there for the rest of my life. This was the moment where I had the feeling that I finally had reached and come to the place I had always sought for.
Shri Sathya Sai, Shri Prema Sai, Ashko Wafai, Ashko Wafai. Shri Sathya Sai, Shri Prema Sai, Ashko Wafai, Ashko Wafai. Shri Krishna Sai, Shri Sirdi Sai, Mehro Safai, Mehro Safai. Shri Krishna Sai, Shri Shirdi Sai, Mehro Safai, Mehro Safai. Guru Ashuzatosh, Guru Buddha Bhai, Barhame Olam To Shahanshahi. Guru Ashuzatosh, Guru Buddha Bhai, Barhame Olam To Shahanshahi. Musa Chali Mola, Isaro Holla, Tajali Eha, Armanra Bhoi. Musa Chali Mola, Isaro Holla, Tajali Eha, Armanra Bhoi. Shri Sathya Sai, Shri Prema Sai, Eshko Vafai, Eshko Vafai. Ya Rasulallah, Mola Ali Wallah, Barhar Dardogam, Amno Rahoi. Ya Rasulallah, Mola Ali Wallah, Barhar Dardogam, Amno Rahoi. Hey Sathya Sai, Ya Sathya Sai, To Noor-e Allah, Aho Ahurahi. Hey Sathya Sai, Ya Sathya Sai, To Noor-e Allah, Aho Ahurahi. Shri Sathya Sai, Shri Prema Sai, Eshko Vafai, Eshko Vafai. Shri Krishna Sai, Shri Shirdi Sai, Mehro Safai, Mehro Safai. Shri Krishna Sai, Shri Shirdi Sai, Mehro Safai, Mehro Safai. Shri Sathya Sai, Shri Prema Sai, Eshko Vafai, Eshko Vafai. Shri Sathya Sai, Shri Prema Sai, Eshko Vafai, Eshko Vafai. Shri Sathya Sai, Shri Prema Sai, Eshko Vafai, Eshko Vafai.
If you are like me, then I am sure you will be wondering what stage of prayer or Aradhana are you in when we hear these 4 stages or levels of Aradhana? Well, I think the answer is that all of us are at different points of time in our lives. In each of these stages, we have got Swami's help for us unasked. We have prayed and got his help. We have had conversations with him in our own prayer rooms, in our own hearts, and there have been times when we have enjoyed that blissful communion where neither of us have spoken, yet we have felt each other's presence. Our endeavor must be to constantly move towards this 4th stage of Aradhana or prayer, where we are in constant communion and union with our dear Swami. Now, how to make that happen is also a detailed process which is explained to us beautifully by Dr. Narendranath Reddy, a devotee from several decades and also the chairperson of the Sri Sathya Sai International Organization.
With love, reverence and gratitude, I offer my prayerful pranams at the divine lotus feet of our dearest, loving and omnipresent Lord Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai Baba. Dear brothers and sisters, loving Sai Ram to all of you. We observe April 24th as Aradhana Day to express our love and gratitude to Bhagawan for all the love, blessings and guidance we received from him as our divine mother, divine father, guru and God. How do we express our love and gratitude to Him? He Himself has shown the way by implicitly and completely following His teachings. I would like to share with you on this Aradhana day one of the fourfold formula Swami has given. The Chamatkar, which is miracles, then Samskar, which is transformation, then Paropkar, which is selfless service, and then Sakshatkar, which is self-realization, liberation, which we are all looking for, and which is the goal and purpose of life. Because Swami said, the purpose of human life and even purpose of the Sri Sathya Sai International Organization is to make us realize our innate divinity, manifest that divinity, and help others realize the divinity. Coming to this fourfold formula, first is Chamatkar, wherein we talk to God, we pray to God, we communicate to God. But when we are pray to God for peace, prosperity, wealth, and health. So whenever we are challenged with problems, whether it is financial, health-wise, or work-related, family-related, society-related, we go, the recourse is the Lord, God, who listens to our prayers. They say prayer is one of the best instruments for us to get to realize our goals. So here God listens to our prayers, answers our prayers, and we are very happy. These are called miracles. And there are astounding miracles with Swami. Each one of us experienced it in our life, and we have many millions of devotees around the world who have experienced His miracles. His miracles galore. They are astounding, awe-inspiring, and mind-boggling. But Swami says these miracles are His visiting cards. These are expressions of His love. But in His divine mission, Swami Himself said they are like mosquitoes and a huge elephant, to show how insignificant they are. That means we start here, but then we go to the next step. What is that? Swami says samskar. He came to transform our human hearts. So we are not able to know our real innate divinity because of the impurities we have. So Swami has shown us the way how to get rid of the impurities. The major impurities we have is kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya. Desire, anger, greed, attachment, pride, and jealousy. These are the things which cloud our vision and make us not see our innate divinity. So how to get rid of that? The solution is very simple. Swami has said, practicing the essential, eternal, and fundamental human values. Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, Ahimsa. Truth, right conduct, peace, love, and non-violence. But it is even simpler. The essence of all these human values, Swami said, is one, that is love. Because love in thought is truth, love in action is right conduct, love in feeling is peace, and love in understanding is non-violence. So what all we need to practice is this divine love. Then automatically our life gets transformed. Because Swami says God is love is God, live in love. So, but this divine love, Swami Himself said, it is eternal. It is never changing. It is unconditional. It is selfless. It is always giving and forgiving. That is what we need to practice. For that, we need to give the highest priority to God in life. And also we need to have one-pointed focus how to practice this love. And this love should be love for love's sake. There are many examples of great devotees, their intense love for God. It should not be lukewarm, it should be intense love. That is why the great teacher, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, if you cry for God for 3 days, the God will appear before you. But our Swami is so loving and compassionate. He said, you pray intensely for God for 11 seconds, God will be with you wherever you are. That is the assurance. So we need to have that kind of intensity. When we practice this and our heart gets transformed, that means here God is talking to us. So God is telling how to get rid of these negative qualities by practicing the positive human values. When we do this, as we get transformed, the next stage comes paropkar, selfless service, where we get involved in serving our fellow human beings. So God is telling us what to do, and we seek His guidance. So there is a communication between God and the devotee. In the first, when we pray, we are communicating to God for help. In the second, He is transforming us. In the second stage, now we have a mutual communication where God is showing the way through the selfless service. Selfless service is love in action. And Swami says this is one of the easiest and best ways to get rid of our ego. But Swami said what selfless service should be important is the quality, not the quantity. Two important principles, Swami said, when we are doing service, we should not think we are doing to somebody else. The service is for our own self-transformation. That is why in Sanskrit it is called Swayam Sevak. Really we are serving ourselves, not somebody else. We should remember that, and with that attitude we should serve. Second thing is, when we do service, we should think we are serving the other person is God, divine. So we should do with humility and reverence, go on our knees and be happy for the opportunity that is given to us to serve the other person who is divine. So a stage will come when we do this service, we see the person who is serving, the person who is served, and the process of service are all divine. They all become one. This is called Triputi. They all become unity. You realize that unity. And also, the selfless service helps us to get rid of the impurities. Our heart becomes pure. Swami said purity is divinity. So in this way we achieve both unity as well as purity and thus divinity. That's why Jesus said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Because once we are pure, then we have no obstacles clouding our vision. And actually, two major obstacles when we are doing selfless service is doership and enjoyership. That I am the doer, but we should have the conviction, really, God is the real doer. We are just happen to be the instrument. And third is enjoyership. That means I want the results of what I do, the service, whether it is recognition or whether any profit or results. We should not think about it. We should do with the dedication of the action to God. Then really the service results in getting rid of our ego and making us closer to self-realization. As this process continues, then final stage comes Sakshatkar, where we realize we are divine. So this is the process where, because we realize we are divine, God is not talking to us, neither we are talking to God, we are divine. This is called Dakshinamurti method. Swami said that this is the Dakshinamurti's embodiment of Lord Shiva, where as a young guru, teacher, he teaches the disciples under the banyan tree, and these disciples are old, and the mode of communication is silence. So the teacher is not talking anything, but the doubts of all the disciples are all gone. And then you realize you and he are one. That is the stage which comes. For that, so we start with this chamatkar, which leads to samskar, that is transformation, then it leads to paropkar, selfless service, finally make us realize that we are that divine. So I pray to Swami so that we can follow this fourfold formula and realize our true nature in this very lifetime. Thank you, and Jai Sai Ram.
eternal. Through this life of distraction and of illusion, remind me, my Lord, who I am. Through this life of distraction and of illusion, remind me, my Lord, who I am. I am truth, I am peace, divine bliss. I am truth, I am peace, divine bliss. Ananda Swarupa, He Prema Swarupa, remind me, my Lord, who I am. Ananda Swarupa, He Prema Swarupa, remind me, my Lord, who I am. I am love, I am love, pure love. I am love, I am love, pure love. Remind me, my Lord. Remind me, my Lord. Remind me, my Lord, who I am.
Om Jai Jagadish Hare Swami Sathya Sai Hare Bhakta Jana Samrakshaka Bhakta Jana Samrakshaka Kalki Maheshwara Om Jai Jagadish Hare Shashivardhana Shridhara Sarva Prayapate Swami Sarva Prayapate Ashita Kalpana Gita Ashita Kalpana Gita Apapaya Om Jai Jagadish Hare Mata Pita Guru Vaita Mumari Antayunide Swami Mari Antayunide Nada Brahma Jagannatha Nada Brahma Jagannatha Name Prashaya Om Jai Jagadish Hare Omkara Rupa Jasmi Sai Mahadeva Sathya Sai Mahadeva Mangala Arati Amrita Mangala Arati Amrita Mangala Deva Om Jai Jagadish Hare Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana 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 Om Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana Narayana Om Jai Satgurudeva Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana 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 Om Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana Narayana Om Jai Satgurudeva Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana 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 Om Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana Narayana Om Jai Satgurudeva Shanti Shanti Samasta Loka Sukhino Bhavantu समस्तलोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्तलोकाः सुखिनो